Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Practical Resources for Strategic Partnerships. My name is Lisa Mae Simpson. I serve as the Director of Education here at Forefront. Just in case you're not familiar with us, we are the only statewide association in the U.S. that represents both grant makers and nonprofits, as well as their advisors and their allies. And our mission is to build a vibrant social impact sector for all the people of Illinois. We do this by providing education, advocacy, research, and mobilizing our members around campaigns like the Mission Sustainability Initiative that advance the sector. I'm going to turn it over to our presenters in just a moment, but before we dive in today, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First of all, everyone's phone lines are muted, and that's just to keep the background noise to a minimum. We really do welcome your questions, though, so I want to invite you to take a moment right now and find the chat box. On my screen, it's in the lower left-hand corner. So please type any questions that you have there, or if you have any technical difficulties, please let us know in that space, and we will have time for questions at the end of the presentation. Also want to let you know that we are recording this webinar, so if you'd like to review it later, that will be available on our website at myforefront.org. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Janita and Jean. Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. Well, I want to just say I'm Janita Robinson. I'm Director of the Mission Sustainability Initiative here at Forefront, and I'm really excited to do this webinar here today. In particular, my excitement stems from the fact that I am joined by Jean Butson. Jean is the President and Founder of Mission Plus Strategy Consultant. Welcome, Jean.
Thank you, Janita. It's great to be here.
So I think we have a lot of information that we're going to be able to cover in just a short amount of time, much of it because of Jean's expertise in this issue. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started, folks. I just want to recap for people. I know this was in the information about the webinar, but we're really going to try to answer 4 essential questions today. 1, how do I know if my organization is ready for a permanent or long-term strategic partnership? 2, what role should my board play in exploring that partnership? 3, what steps should I take if I want to merge with an organization? And 4, is there funding available to assist my organization with exploring or implementing that partnership? We may take these a little bit out of order, but I think we're going to cover everything. I'm going to start with that first question of how do I know if my organization is ready to explore a long-term or permanent strategic partnership. And first, I just want to touch upon why this is really important. Right? It's as simple as organizations, before they can partner with one another, need to know where they are and where they're headed as individual organizations. It's really just sort of knowing kind of where you are on a road before you take a different path in many ways. So, and then in terms of the resources that are available, there are some very specific resources that I think can help people out. First of all is the La Piana Strategic Restructuring Assessment Tool, or the SRAT. Some of you may be familiar with the SRAT. This is a tool that is specifically used to help organizations figure out if they are ready to explore or engage in a partnership with another organization. It's an online tool that consists of 25 questions, and it's meant to be answered by an organization's staff, leadership, and board simultaneously. So in many ways, it might seem familiar to people like strategic planning and some of the questions that it asks. What's really great about this tool, though, is it's 25 questions. As I said, it's online, and once you complete it, you're given a written report back, but then also an opportunity to meet with La Piana. You may be familiar with this assessment tool. After the summit that Forefront hosted last October, we offered 20 of these assessments to various nonprofits. There was a lot of demand. We actually had 80 groups apply for those 20 assessments, and I'm excited to announce that we'll be able to offer more of those assessments going forward starting in October. So if people are interested in taking the SRAT in the future, please contact me directly, and my email is up there for everyone. The second tool I want to talk about is the Impact Capacity Assessment Tool, or the ICAT. So the ICAT helps organizations to know where to start when it comes to building organizational capacity. So it's not specifically geared towards strategic partnership, but again, I feel that it's a really helpful general tool for an organization to sort of know where it is before it figures out where it's going. What's great about the ICAT is that Forefront is going to begin offering the ICAT free to its members.
Oh, actually, that is not the case. I'm sorry. It is a tool that is available actually to any interested nonprofit or any grant makers that might be interested in providing it as a tool to their grantees. It is not limited to Forefront members. There is a fee that is associated with that, but we are happy to talk with you about what your needs are and map that through accordingly.
My apologies, Lisa. I think I misread it. So here's the thing. For people in Illinois, Forefront is the exclusive offer of the ICAT.
Actually, for the Cook County and Collar areas, yes.
Yeah. Turning to other resources, I know, Jean, that you have a feasibility assessment that you guys also offer at Mission Plus Strategy. Do you want to talk for a second about that?
Yes, for organizations that are interested in conducting an assessment of whether or not they are a good candidate with another nonprofit for a merger, we have what we refer to as a mini feasibility assessment. And you can find out more about that by contacting me at the email address above. And we also have a comprehensive feasibility assessment as well.
Great. And then we also, here at Forefront, through the MSI, we offer a list of qualified consultants. These are consultants that we've reviewed their background and qualifications and checked their references, who offer an expertise in a number of areas, including strategic planning, which is, again, often that starting point for figuring out whether you're ready to engage in a partnership, but also it lists consultants who have expertise in exploring and implementing partnerships. The link to that list is available on the PowerPoint. There's also on that website, I will just say, for folks who are listening today or maybe looking at this later, information on the RFQ. If you are a consultant or know of a consultant who is interested in being on that list, it is an open or rolling process, so they can apply at any time. But I really highly recommend, if you are not currently working with a consultant, to refer to that list of qualified consultants. So we're really lucky in that if you are looking at engaging in a merger conversation, Jean and her colleagues have created a toolkit that really takes you step by step through that process. And so I want to turn it over to Jean really to talk more in detail about the merger toolkit. Jean?
Thank you, Janita. It's great to be with you this afternoon and great to be with everyone on this call today. I first want to begin the discussion about the nonprofit merger toolkit by giving everybody a little bit of context. And you see on the screen in front of you a picture of the website for the home page for the 2016 study that was completed about nonprofit mergers in the Chicago metropolitan area that is called Mergers as a Strategy for Success. So this was a study that was completed about last fall that discussed 25 completed mergers and 4 mergers that weren't completed, and talked about best practices from the perspective of the executive directors and CEOs on both sides of the mergers, as well as the boards of directors, the leadership of those organizations. And I wanted you to just know that the toolkit that I'm going to talk to you about was developed as a result of the information that came out of that study. And here on the home page where the toolkit is located, let's see if I can do this without, there are a number of resources that I just wanted to alert you to. First of all, the the home page, the whole microsite for the study and the toolkit and other resources can be found at www.chicagonpmergers.org, or if you just Google the title of the study, Mergers as a Strategy for Success, I'm sure you'll find it. You'll come to the home page, and there you'll find a link to download the report, an executive summary, the toolkit tab, a page for funder tools, case studies. So we have 5 in-depth case studies for 5 diverse mergers that were completed that takes you all the way from the beginning through the integration phase. And then we have 2 podcasts with interviews for 3 of the case study participants. And there's also a link on that page for comments. So that's the home page. And I just want to kind of alert you to all of these resources. They're completely free and available. So now let me kind of orient you to the toolkit itself. And here we are in the next slide where I'm going to start that process. So when you click on the Toolkit tab, this is what pops up. This is the actual pathway that we designed that walks you through step by step the process for completing a merger. And there are a number of things in the pathway that I'll point out to you. But first of all, let me just say that the pathway is meant to be chronological. It has a number of different distinctive features. It's color-coded. It has information and tools that pop out. It alerts you to key decision-making points. And it allows you to know step by step exactly what to do in order to complete a merger. But the thing that I really want to emphasize here is that although this is a process that has worked effectively for a lot of people, we really want this to be a process that you feel like that you can change, that it's flexible, that it's something that you don't have to stick to rigidly, because one thing that we know about nonprofit mergers is that each merger is different. You may need to skip portions of this sequence because you've already completed one or more of the steps. So we want you to feel free to rearrange the steps as needed. So let's talk a little bit more about the toolkit. And I'll go into exactly what these symbols mean. So the first thing I want to point out is that it's divided into 3 different sections. And these sections are what we call me, you and me, and we. And me refers to what we call the pre-merger stage. And the pre-merger stage is that part of the process when you are a solitary nonprofit organization and you're thinking about your strategy options and you're concluding that maybe a merger strategy would be a good idea for my nonprofit organization. You're looking at the environmental situation facing your nonprofit, and a number of different conditions are lining up that make you conclude that a merger would be a good idea. And the steps that are in that phase are what we call the me phase. It's before you've identified a merger partner, and the steps take you through the process of helping you actually identify to actually analyze the strategy and identify a partner. The next phase is the merger negotiation stage, or what we refer to as you plus me. So you're not yet merged, but you're 2 organizations or possibly more, and you're now at the table, you're learning about each other, you're deciding whether or not to proceed to a merger negotiation, but you're going through those steps of figuring out if this is the right thing to do, particularly with each other. And then the final stage is what we call the merger negotiation and the implementation stage, and you are we. So the two organizations, again, or more, have now completed the negotiation process. You've voted to merge and begun integrating the organizations. And what you'll see from the toolkit is that these symbols and the color coding will follow throughout the steps in the toolkit, and so that it's easy to identify where you are in the process. So now what I'd like to do is actually take you to the toolkit itself and point out exactly how this works. So if I do this right, I'm going to get you to the toolkit.
You have to share your screen.
Yeah. And
nope. What? So we're gonna go over here. There we go.
And I just did it all wrong.
No, you're good.
This is how you know it's live, folks.
Yep.
Okay.
There we go.
All right, there we go. Folks, I practiced that so many times before we started. All right, so here we are. We're on the toolkit page, and I'm just going to scroll down here a little bit. So here you see, when you get to the top of the page, we have the three, what I just explained to you, the explanation of the three phases, and we're at the toolkit. And so the one thing that I want to point out is that each phase has what we refer to as information boxes. So I'm going to go over here and see if I can get this to do this. And these information boxes will pop up on a step. So here this information box is talking about create a merger committee. So we recommend that you create a board committee to assist with reviewing a merger strategy. So that is just a piece of information, and we place these throughout. We also have toolboxes, and there are about 30 tools throughout. Here we have for this one step alone, which is learning about a merger strategy, 3 separate tools. We have a glossary, a bibliography, and a tool for analyzing a merger strategy. And just to kind of give you an example, the bibliography will open up as a PDF, and it's a detailed bibliography that has several different sources that you can download to learn more about a merger strategy. And then you close that, and we can close this. And so those are available every step of the way. But so you can see the steps are identify critical organizational issues, learn about merger strategy, create a merger committee. And you follow it around until you have what we think of as a decision point. And you know decision points are there because it's got the stoplight symbol. And here it says, seek board approval for a merger strategy. And you go all the way through here, this purple color, until you enter the you plus me stage. And so theoretically, by this point, you've identified who your merger partner will be. You've made a decision to seek a merger strategy. Your board is on board. You've done the analysis. You've identified who's the right partner, and you're ready to move forward with that partner. Now you're going to analyze with each other if a merger strategy, and you go through a whole other analysis. And the tools keep repeating, the tool symbols and information boxes and decision boxes continue to be repeated, so on through that phase until we get into the we phase, where you have the integration and implementation phase. So this is how the toolkit works. It's I'm not going to read every box to you for the toolkit, but you can see that the way this is designed, if you have, say, you've already identified who your merger partner is, you can skip all the way to the you plus me phase. and just pick it up right there. So I'm going to stop there. That in essence is the presentation on the toolkit, and just see if we have any questions from anybody in the audience.
Not yet, so maybe we want to go ahead and move through, and we'll circle back if we need to. So
That's fine.
Are we ready to go back to the slide deck? All right. There we are.
I do. This is Janita. I have one question, Jean. So I find that toolkit very helpful. I think it takes what is a very complex and complicated process and lays it out. I won't say simply, but at least gives you kind of guideposts along the way. If someone wanted to engage in a partnership that wasn't a merger, would you recommend that they still take a look at the toolkit?
Yeah, I think a lot of it can be used in a similar kind of way. And if we, let's see if I can do this. Lisa, I might be able to do it. Let's see if I'm going to go back and share. And I'll just to give you an example, share. Okay, so you want to do. It's just like you want to analyze the strategy first. So you want to identify what are your issues, what is it you're trying to achieve, and what strategy is going to get you there best. So let's say what's a very typical collaboration strategy is an administrative joint venture partnership. And so somebody might say, we are too thin in the back office. We do not have sufficient administrative services. We don't have HR. We don't have enough fundraising staff to get all the fundraising done. Our finance and accounting staff are not deep enough. So we would like to get together with other organizations and share those services. That's the analysis that we've done. And so you're going to follow similar kinds of similar steps in terms of analyzing the strategy. You're going to create a committee to look at it. You're going to seek board approval for the strategy itself, because there are implications for the organization, and you're going to look for help. That is, you're going to look for maybe experts who can help you develop that strategy, and then you're going to look for partners who are interested in and have maybe similar kinds of needs, and then develop a vision for what it is you're going to try to achieve together. So yeah, just kind of talking it all the way through, I think in many ways it does work on a collaboration strategy.
Great to know. Thank you so much.
Ready to go back? Okay.
And I think actually it's a good segue into what was listed as question 2 in terms of what's the role of the board in exploring a partnership for an organization. That toolkit, Jean, has a lot of spots along the path that really talks about the role of the board, whether it's that initial vote, forming a committee, later forming a joint committee with the other organization. I just want to take a step back, though, and talk a little generally about the role of the board in partnerships. I think for a lot of organizations, whether it's about ED approaching their board or a particular board member bringing this up, this can raise a lot of apprehension. But what organization staff and board need to realize is that when you're thinking about a partnership, this is not an admission of defeat in any way. It's really about how you think proactively about the future of your organization. Many experts really compare this exploration of a partnership to part of a board's fiduciary duty, in particular their duty of care in terms of figuring out how best to use the resources of the organization to meet the client and the community that they're trying to serve. I spoke earlier about strategic planning as a way to figure out where your organization is and determine if it's ready to engage in a partnership. And you can oftentimes use the idea or the process of strategic planning and your board's involvement in that strategic planning to really begin to explore a partnership. And this can sometimes, I don't want to say destigmatize, but maybe de-escalate in a way the idea of exploring a partnership. It really just makes it part of the routine role of the board in thinking about the future of the organization. It's an option, as if any other part of strategic planning is an option that you're analyzing, looking at how it might impact your success down the road. In terms of practical resources, I really want to point people to a couple of things. BoardSource, which as many of you know is a national resource on board and nonprofit issues, has a website called The Power of Possibility. The link is there on the slide, and the slides will be provided to you afterwards. On the BoardSource website, there's a full discussion guide about partnerships for boards, and there's specific guidance on strategic planning, leadership transitions, scaling programs, and adapting to change. And so these guides can really be tools that board members or that an ED can use with their board, again, to sort of start that discussion about a partnership. And I mentioned leadership transitions and adapting to change, and I just want to touch on that a little bit. Jean, in your study, you hit upon the fact that for a lot of organizations, they're often exploring partnerships at the time of leadership transitions.
That's right.
Right? When someone's retiring or a long-term ED is about to leave, that this is really a good point for boards and the outgoing ED to sort of reflect on what the possibility is.
Yeah.
And so I want people to keep that in mind. And I mentioned adapting to change, right? Nonprofits, obviously, and their boards need to be thinking about their future and thinking about, again, how they want to best serve their clients and community going forward. But as we know, especially here in Illinois, we're oftentimes impacted by outside forces, such as state budgets and cuts in funding. And so we have to really think also about partnerships as a response to that change that is sometimes coming in externally. And so this, again, is a place where the board can be really helpful in thinking about how to best strategically position the organization going forward. And as I said, on the BoardSource website, there's a specific section talking about strategic planning, leadership transitions, scaling programs, and adapting to change. And then finally, in relationship to the board, I want to mention that in early 2018, the MSI is going to be offering a workshop that actually talks specifically about the role of boards. This is something that we're doing in partnership with some organizations that have been helping us think through this, and we think that it'll be a good resource for board members and EDs or CEOs to attend together, and I hope a number of you will be a part of it. So, moving on to the last question, is there funding available for organizations looking at exploring or implementing strategic partnerships? The great answer is yes, there is. And I want to talk a little bit about national, local, and funding through Forefront. So nationally, I think one of the best resources is the Sea Change Lodestar Fund for Nonprofit Collaboration. The link to the fund is there on the slide. This organization provides funding for nonprofits across the country exploring partnerships. They do require that the nonprofits find local matching funds. Those funds can come from your own operating budgets, or they can come from funders in your community. But I encourage people to check out that website. Locally, I want to encourage people to talk to their existing funders. And I know that, again, this can cause a little bit of apprehension on the part of organizations about approaching their existing funders if they're thinking about a partnership. But I would say a couple things about that. One, funders are getting more and more accustomed to hearing organizations talk about the idea of partnerships. But 2, much in the way that you can approach your board about a partnership through the lens of strategic planning and thinking about the future of your organization, you can approach your funder either talking about it through strategic planning or talking about it as generally capacity building, because that's really the ultimate goal of any partnership. It's about increasing the capacity of your organization to serve its clients and communities. So again, I really encourage nonprofits to talk to their existing funders to see if they might be willing to support the exploration or implementation of a partnership. You can also, on the MSI website, we list out the supporters of our initiative, and a lot of those funders directly fund their own grantees in exploring or implementing partnerships. We're actually working with our funders to include information on their websites that links to the MSI, but also clarifies how their processes work in conjunction. And then I just want to talk in detail about the MSI grants. So MSI offers grants to cover the one-time costs associated with the exploration or implementation of long-term or permanent strategic partnerships. I know that's a mouthful. So let me break that down a little bit. One-time costs are costs really directly related to the cost of the negotiation or the implementation. So they are not ongoing operating costs, they are not staff costs, but oftentimes the cost of a facilitator, consultant, or a vendor to help with the cost of the exploration or implementation. And I'll talk a little bit more in detail about some examples. When we talk about long-term or permanent partnerships, I think it's important to actually provide some examples of what it is we're talking about. So we're talking about programmatic alliances, co-locations, back office or administrative collaborations, and mergers and acquisitions. I think the one that confuses, and this list is not meant to be exclusive, I should say, the one that confuses people in terms of eligibility for the grants is oftentimes programmatic alliances. So again, we're talking about something that's long-term or permanent and something that changes the way of doing business for the nonprofits involved. In a classic example of what might be a programmatic alliance is something that really involves changing the way staff work together, or sorry, what could be a programmatic alliance is something that changes the way that staff work together. What is unfortunately not a long-term partnership is if a tutoring program partners with a school or a park district to offer their program at that school or park district. That's not really a change in the way that either program or organization is doing business. It's just a change in location. So these are the types of partnerships that qualify for our grants. Our grants currently are available to nonprofits working in Cook, DuPage, Lake, and Kane counties. We are hoping to expand this. This right now is very much dependent on the source of our funding for the grants. We provide preference to organizations with budgets of less than $10 million. Organizations that have budgets larger than that can apply, but they have to demonstrate a need. It is just unfortunately the reality of we have limited funds ourselves to be able to give to these grants, and so we want to make sure that we're being thoughtful about where they go. The types of grants. So we offer 3 types of grants: pre-exploratory, exploratory, and implementation. Pre-exploratory is really a grant often for an organization that has yet to identify a partner, or it may be for one or more organizations who know that they or who want to explore a partnership but are really very early on in the process and maybe haven't even identified what type of partnership they're looking to explore. So these grants are capped at $5,000 because they're really meant to be part of those early conversations. They can be a cash grant, but they're also in-kind grants as well. I talked earlier about the SRAT, the online assessment tool. Forefront had offered 20 of those, as I said, after the October Summit, and we'll be offering more of those going forward. These count for us as a pre-exploratory grant. Exploratory grants are for organizations that are in the midst of negotiations with each other on a partnership. Oftentimes, funds are used for a feasibility study or for a consultant to help negotiate an MOU or to otherwise facilitate the process of determining whether organizations have the right fit in order to engage in a partnership. And then what we call our implementation grants are grants for organizations who have engaged in a partnership, whether it be merger or back office collaboration, and need implementation funds to truly join in that partnership. So the easy example is with a merger, organizations may need to combine their payroll systems, or they may need to combine their email marketing systems or donor databases. These are sort of the classic examples of implementation grants. Both exploratory and implementation grants range from $5,000 to $75,000. Implementation grants tend to be a little bit larger. It is possible for an organization to progress through all 3 phases of funding. It's not necessary, but it is possible. Please note, however, if you were to receive a grant during all 3 stages, your total funding would not be more than $75,000. Let me talk a little bit about the grant application process itself. So because of the unique function of our grants, because of the focus on one-time costs, there's the requirement that all potential grant applications have an initial call with me, the MSI director. Now, these calls are completely confidential. So at any point in the stage, whether it's a staff leader and her board thinking about a partnership, whether it's 2 organizations having preliminary discussions, or whether it's a staff leader really thinking about how to approach their board about a partnership, you can set up a time to speak with me, and that information will be kept confidential. Information is kept confidential really up until the point someone applies for a grant application, and then that application is submitted to the funders committee for review and potential approval. The application, which there's a link to our sample grant application online. If you're invited to apply, you'll be sent the actual grant application. But the application is really very simple and straightforward. There's actually, I think it's a 4-page limit on the prose section of the application. And we're really looking for 3 things. We're looking for evidence of board support. We're looking for the scope of work for any consultants and vendors, and for potential for positive community client impact. So let me talk a little bit about those 3 things. Evidence of board support. So I've talked about the role of boards in this process. On Jean's toolkit, you saw the board listed in a number of places, whether it was like an initial vote, forming a committee, forming a joint committee when you're talking about a merger. We really feel that it's important that there is some evidence that the organization's board support the negotiation process. It is not a commitment on the board's part that they are set on an end result, but really evidence that they are ready to engage in good faith negotiations on a partnership. And so we often ask for evidence in terms of, is it that they've created a board committee? Have they passed a board resolution? Have they entered into a letter of intent? But something to show that there is support at the board level of these organizations. The scope of work for consultants and vendors. So because these grants are limited to the one-time costs, we want to see really what those costs are. And so we ask that you provide with your grant application the scope of work for your consultants or vendors. So if, say, 2 organizations had merged, The scope of work might be from a rebranding consultant or even from a printer who's going to print new collateral material. If you're exploring a partnership, it might be a scope of work for the consultant who's helping with the negotiations. But that scope will tell us a time frame, some benchmarks, and it will also help us to understand the expertise of the people that you're working with. And then finally, the potential for positive community client impact. So, as I said, right, the goal of a partnership is ultimately about furthering your organization's mission. And part of that is having a positive impact on the community and clients that you're serving. So we asked, specifically in the grant application, to see how you anticipate your partnership having a positive impact on your community and clients. In terms of timing, our grant application really has a rolling application deadline. You can apply at any point in time. We do have some advisory deadlines, however. There are 2 more for the calendar year, October 9th and November 27th. It was October 9th and November 27th. And they basically occur approximately every 6 weeks. And the purpose of having these advisory deadlines is that if you apply by that deadline, you will get a response within 30 days. And if it's a positive response, oftentimes you'll also get a check within 30 days as well. We really want this to be a simple, straightforward, and quick process for our nonprofits. So that's a little bit about our grant application process. I want to open it up to any questions that we might have from the audience.
Janita, could you repeat those deadlines one more time?
Sure, Lisa. So the deadlines for the rest of the year are Monday, October 9th, and then is it Tuesday, November 27th, or Monday, November 27th. And we'll post the deadlines for 2018 before the end of the year. But as I said, our deadlines are typically about every 6 weeks or so.
Great, thank you. We had one more just clarifying question about eligibility for grants. Could you just confirm, so when you talk about Cook County, that does include organizations that are based in the city of Chicago? It's not limited to the suburbs?
Right, that is correct. So yes, Chicago and the suburbs of Cook County, Kane, DuPage, and Lake counties.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? I actually, we may or may not get some other questions from the audience. Jean, I wanted to ask you a question. What do you hear from your clients in terms of what's the one thing they wish they had known at the start of the process?
Oh, the merger process. Well, there's probably a couple of things, but I think people are always confused about whether or not to talk to their donors about the merger, and I think people assume that it's definitely something they shouldn't talk to their donors about, but actually that couldn't be more incorrect. Donors definitely want to know, and they want to be sort of partners in the process, but not in a bad way. They actually see this, they want to be helpful. They even understand that the merger may not happen and that that's okay. And they oftentimes, particularly if donors are very close to organizations and they consider themselves to be a partner, if they're not informed, they consider that to be almost like a slight. And so I think they're surprised to find out just how much funders really want to be kept informed about decisions to pursue a merger, actually. So that comes as a surprise. Just how important the role of the board chair is in the process, how critical that person is in terms of organizing the support of the board. And they are often really confused. Executive directors or CEOs are confused about exactly how to handle the communication. And that's very difficult to give one answer or another. It really depends on the culture. And so at the start of the process, they're often really seeking guidance on what to do about that. And so we have to really spend time talking about what is the culture of the organization like, how are they handling transparency around other critical issues.
Interesting. I'm glad that you brought up culture, because in 2018 that's another topic that we hope to cover in a workshop. Because I do think it's critically important for organizations engaging in partnerships to have a good understanding of their own culture, and then understanding how that's going to impact the partnership culture.
Culture is incredibly important, and we've really done a lot of work to increase the amount of due diligence around culture, so that organizations really understand what is my cultural type, what is the other organization's cultural type, what is the implication of combining the cultures of two organizations or more in terms of merging, or even in certain kinds of partnerships. I think you would really want to understand that. I also would say, for people who haven't been involved with MSI, I think MSI is doing a fantastic job. I feel like MSI has really changed the culture around collaboration in our community, and I can feel it. I don't know if others are feeling it in the sector, but for people that are looking for funding, who are looking for information on this topic, you've had a tremendous impact in a very short time, Janita, and I'm not kidding. You're a great resource here. MSI is a fantastic resource, and very, very easy to work with. So if organizations haven't applied, I really encourage them to apply, even though I know that means more work for you. But some of us have been begging for a resource like this for a very long time, and it's just really outstanding what you're doing, and it's helping so much for groups to be able to pursue these strategies.
Well, I don't know if I have much to say after that. I will use that, though, to point out MSI really is meant to be here as a resource for people, so I hope that you take advantage of it. And this webinar is meant to be a resource, but it's really a starting point. Jean and I both know that just the idea of having these discussions around partnerships, again, can raise a little bit of apprehension. But we want you to know that there are resources out there. There are resources like ourselves out there, but also resources available online that we've pointed to. And we can sometimes point you in the direction of someone who's been through this before, because that's the other thing to remember. Other organizations have gone through this. They have not only survived, but they have thrived because of it. So please keep that in mind. I'm going to make a final plug for people listening in today who are not Forefront members. Please consider joining. But with that, I want to thank Jean for all your knowledge on this. And for people who don't know, Jean herself went through a merger process when she led a nonprofit, and that's part of her expertise, having personally gone through it. And my thanks to Lisa Simpson for making sure that all the technical issues went well. Thank all of you, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future. Bye-bye.
Thank you.